Welcome into Morning Invest on this Wednesday, June 17th. So great to have you here. I'm Clayton Morris, longtime real estate investor, former news anchor turned entrepreneur. And this show is all about helping you build financial intelligence so you can build financial freedom. And these are the news stories, I think, around finance that matter to the average American, not the Wall Street crew, who's certainly flying high right now, happy because Jerome Powell testified yesterday in front of Congress once again and said there's a long road to recovery. Now, normally that kind of thing would move markets, and we'll get to what he had to say, but stock markets seem to be just happy because of what they're doing behind the scenes to buy up all of this junk, making Wall Street super happy. Also, stocks jumped because of what President Trump had to say about infrastructure, getting word from the White House about a $1 trillion infrastructure plan, in addition to another round of stimulus money. Those pieces are coming together. So what will that look like? We've got 5 different key areas on this infrastructure plan that we're hearing from the White House. But it doesn't look like Republicans are too happy about this $2 trillion price tag right now from President Trump. So will it be $1 trillion? Will there be some sort of compromise? We'll see. Also on the show, Jim Banks, Republican congressman, has 5 key areas that he thinks need to be in this next round of stimulus. But there's one big thing that's missing from his list of 5, and we'll talk about that. Plus, I'm super excited because one of my longtime friends, a dear friend of mine, we were co-anchors for many years, one of the keenest, smartest minds when it comes to sports, and frankly, a lot of things, not just sports, but is going to be on the show today. My friend Dave Briggs, longtime sports anchor and close friend, is going to be on the show today to talk about the state of sports in this world. What are we doing? I've been waiting and salivating for baseball to come back, for us to talk about football again, to get back to some sort of normalcy. NBA finals should be happening right around now, right? Usually this time of the year, I would think. Wimbledon, all of that missing. So what are we going to see by way of reopening? Dave is going to join us here in just a bit to talk about sports. So let's get started and talk about Jerome Powell. He spoke yesterday in front of one of those Zoom conferences around the stimulus, what the Federal Reserve is doing to buoy the economy right now and lift everything up. Did he have any words of wisdom for Congress on what they should do? Let's hear from Fed Chair Jerome Powell on what he is planning to use with these tools and when they plan to take their foot off of the gas a little bit. Take a listen.
The tools that we're using under Section 13.3 authority are appropriately reserved for times of emergency. When this crisis is behind us, we will put them away. In the June report, we review the implications of these tools for the Fed's balance sheet. Many of these facilities have been supported by funding from the CARES Act, and we will be disclosing on a monthly basis names and details of participants in each such facility, amounts borrowed and interest rate charged, and overall costs, revenues, and fees for each facility. We embrace our responsibility to the American people to be as transparent as possible. And we appreciate that the need for transparency is heightened when we're called upon to use our emergency powers.
So that was a little slap. To me, I read that as a little bit of a slap to the Treasury Department and the White House. Maybe I'm wrong, but I took that as, when talking about transparency, who's receiving these corporate bailouts? Who's have these junk bonds bought up? Which businesses are going to be the ones that are going to have to prove themselves here to get this liquidity? We're going to give you a full list of that on a weekly basis, so you'll know exactly at what interest rate and how they're being serviced. That's in stark contrast to the way that these PPP loans have been rolled out. We've covered it here on the show. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was asked about that last week during his testimony in front of the Senate. And they were pressing on, why can't we find out which one of these public companies are getting millions of dollars that was supposed to go to Main Street, to these smaller businesses? And they said, you know what, we're just not going to release that information. Larry Kudlow doubled down on that, senior economic advisor for President Trump. But then about a day later, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin rolled that back and said, no, we will have a discussion with the Senate, making sure that they're getting a list of these individuals and will be as transparent as possible. So it seems like they walked that back. But Federal Reserve not slowing down, and said we have every right to use these tools and we're going to continue to use them well into 2022. So among the things that the Fed chair talked about is the level of output and employment remain far below where they need to be right now, pre-pandemic levels, and significant uncertainty remains about the timing and strength of the recovery. So The White House is saying we're going to be bouncing back by the third quarter. You heard Larry Kudlow the other day doing his little song and dance in his top hat, talking about how everything is roaring back. But Chairman Powell has continued to say this is going to be a long slog. Like even if we're at 20% unemployment, that's still twice the size of what we were during the Great Recession back in 2009, in October of 2009. So he went on to say, Powell did, it's out of an excess of caution to preserve these gains and the market function by following through. He said, we're telling the American business owners and the American people that we're going to continue to buy up these junk bonds. We're going to continue to provide liquidity in the market, continue to try to keep inflation at a certain level, and we have to follow through on that. And that's why the stock market just, had a great day. They jumped 180 points. It's a 4-day winning streak now for the stock market, thanks to what the Fed chief has said, in addition to what President Trump has said on infrastructure. Interestingly, the Fed chair also shot down negative interest rates. I see a lot of you asking here in the chat about, interest rates, negative interest rates. Will we go negative? Multiple Fed chairs have now said, no, we're not going negative. We don't see any need for it. We have many tools left in our tool belt. We don't need to do it. So he shot down any possibility of it. Of course, you remember a few months ago, President Trump tweeting about how it would be beautiful if we had negative interest rates. He said, just like other parts of the world, it would be a beautiful number, he said. Those were his words, a beautiful number. Yet it's been a failed program in Europe. Just talk to Sweden. Just talk to other countries who've tried this. It doesn't work. It's been a disaster. We have 2 years of a track record of it not working. So I don't know what beautiful number he's looking at. But so no negative interest rates. And also, interestingly, they're not going to start winding down their balance sheets. What does that mean? That means that they're sitting on trillions of dollars of stuff that they've just bought up. They're buying $4 billion a day of these junk bonds, mortgage-backed securities, all of this stuff. The stuff that Wall Street doesn't want. Now they're buying corporate debt also. Companies that got hurt during the pandemic. And they're not going to slow down. He said, we have enough. This debt is fine on our balance sheet and it doesn't pose any kind of threat to our financial stability or inflation. That's remarkable. You're sitting on $6 trillion on your balance sheet and it doesn't pose any real threat to inflation or your financial stability. But again, doesn't this paint the same old picture? On the one side, you have Wall Street's doing just fine. All of these investors doing just fine. And then on the other side, you have the American people, you who can't pay for medications. We have Steve, one of our viewers here, who's homeless, set up a GoFundMe to be able to help pay for medical bills and can't even get a bank account in order to get the money out of the GoFundMe account. So the tale of two different stories. Again, Wall Street, Main Street. So one investor, I thought that this was interesting. I'm going to quote this person. This is an economist. Said Wall Street is doing backflips again, thanks to the Fed's announcement that they're going to buy up more junk bonds. Quote, it feels almost like there's nothing to fear for investors. Most of the default risk is now shouldered by the Fed. So during a recession, investors are fine because the Fed steps in and protects them. And during a non-recession, they're fine because everyone's buying and retail's exploding and people are using airplanes again. This just goes to show you that in any environment, they're fine. A total global pandemic, they're fine. But most Americans, not fine and being crushed right now, saddled by rent that they're not able to pay, mortgages they're not able to pay, medications they can't buy. So many people left off the ability to get medications right now. Reports saying 12 million Americans being crushed right now in their inability to get access to medications. Incredibly troubling. So news of this infrastructure. What does President Trump want? Well, we heard yesterday that the White House, a couple of sources came forward and said the president plans to roll out a $1 trillion infrastructure stimulus plan. Now, that might be in addition to the $2 trillion that he already wants or in combination with. So that's starting to come together. We're hearing from sources now that Republicans and the White House would want one bill, one giant bill that would include infrastructure. Will it include $1 trillion? Who knows? But President Trump wants roads. Here are the 5 things that it's focused on. Roads, bridges, tunnels, 5G wireless infrastructure, and rural broadband. Now, I'm curious about this 5G wireless infrastructure because there was a whole lot of outcry in Europe when Huawei, the Chinese telecom, was going to be putting in these 5G towers. And you had the Eurozone basically saying, yeah, that's no problem, until you realize that it was a huge problem. That you're going to have China controlling your 5G network because they're trustworthy. Now, is the same thing going to apply in America? How will they assist with a 5G infrastructure rollout? Do we trust our government to not misuse that information? I'm just really curious what the details of this 5G infrastructure will look like. And rural broadband. Will they be working in tandem with Verizon and Sprint and others, and AT&T for this rollout, maybe by through some sort of tax credits or other things, or are they going to be out there rolling coil themselves? I'll be fascinated to see that. So Republicans, once again, are looking for this one big bill that would include a second round of stimulus in addition to infrastructure. But not a lot of Republicans are exactly happy about this price tag. Chairman Grassley and others have been asked about this over the past 48 hours, this $2 trillion, and they've had to couch it by saying, well, we're going to wait and see through July just to how things are. We're going to keep our eye on this number through July, and then we'll make a determination then. Chairman Grassley was a little bit more vocal about it, basically saying, well, we want to keep it near $1 trillion. So I don't know that that's going to make the White House happy. Once again, I think that the White House is able to play good cop, bad cop here, don't you? On the one hand, they're able to say, we're not going for $3 trillion, which is what Nancy Pelosi wants to do, but we're not going to go for $1 trillion. That's what Mitch McConnell wants to do, one of the most unliked senators in the Senate. I want to be somewhere in the middle, doing this massive infrastructure plan to get people back to work. But as you know, the problem we talked about yesterday with infrastructure plans is that it takes a long time for these things to bear fruit. Remember during the Obama administration, all of these shovel-ready projects that simply weren't shovel-ready at all? And big companies got their backs scratched through lobbying and managed to get all these nice cushy contracts. Like I said, remember Solyndra and others? So $1 trillion, there better be oversight set up to watch this, because right now there are 3 different oversight programs in place and they're not working. There's $3 trillion already out there for the stimulus, and Brian Miller was just approved to be the main watchdog. He's a Trump ally. You have these other departments that don't have any staff right now to make sure that this money isn't being misused and misspent. So you're going to have $1 trillion infrastructure plan that's going to be lining the pockets of all of these people in their back home in their districts. Oh, you need a new road built? Oh, you lobbied. You donated money to my campaign, didn't you? I smell trouble from a mile away on this one, don't you? But they're not happy about this $2 trillion plan. I want to talk about Representative Jim Banks on the stimulus, because he rolled out an opinion piece yesterday and had 5 different proposals that he thinks should be in the next stimulus package. Now, Representative Jim Banks of Indiana, specifically talking about the unemployment rate there, it's just been 17% unemployment in Indiana. It's been really bad. It's been really bad. Their response to the virus was slower than some other states like Ohio, so they got bit pretty hard, specifically in Indianapolis. So there's 5 different things that Representative Banks wants in the next stimulus. Let's see if you're on board with this. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Number 1, he wants the death tax eliminated, because he says that families who are already dealing with an unexpected loss from a loved one over COVID-19 don't need an added punishment of the death tax. He wants that removed. Number 2, small business owners and entrepreneurs need extra cash, he says, to rebuild and invest in their employees. The self-employment tax hurts job creators, and we need job creation more than ever. So that self-employment tax, he also wants that rolled back. Number 3, he wants an incentivized work program, so letting workers keep more of their own money, and he wants to cut the payroll tax, which is what President Trump has been calling for. What they already did back in 2016, another payroll tax. But Republicans aren't on board. I'm surprised to hear him say this. A lot of Republicans are not on board, because how in the world are we going to pay for anything if we have more of a payroll tax cut? And let's be honest, Social Security is already on its last legs, only 15 years left of solvency in that account. So he's calling for payroll tax cuts, and he specifically says we need to do that more than any direct cash payments to Americans, because you have to earn a paycheck to benefit. Great. But what about the people who don't have a job to go back to? You can't cut their payroll because they don't have a job. so many millions of Americans are unemployed, not because they want to be, but because the business they worked for is no longer in existence. What is going to happen to those people? Number 4 on his list, Americans shouldn't have to worry about their taxes going up. So he wants a cap on tax and making sure that taxes don't go up during a recession. And number 5, he says that he wants to suspend burdensome regulation. That he said federal regulations cost small businesses $1,500 per employee. Now, I'm not sure specifically what programs he's talking about. He said lifting that burden on regulation would enable businesses to hire more employees. Now, I'm all for that. I think this just sounds like small potatoes. And I also don't think it gets to the heart of where's any kind of a discussion about state and local governments in here, in this mix. Now, there are some sources saying that the White House and others are calling for billions of dollars in direct assistance to state and local governments. Remember, Mitch McConnell had said no blue state bailouts, no money going to state and local governments. The HEROES Act passed by the House did call for that. And we thought Republicans were going to say, no way. Well, now we're hearing from the White House sources and others that yes, in fact, there will be direct assistance to state and local governments. Red state, blue state, it doesn't matter because they are getting crushed right now. And essential services are drying up. And Chairman Powell yesterday talked about this, how he sees that as a definite need, not only for essential services, but employment. All of these people at these state and local levels that are going to lose their jobs if they don't get additional money into the state hands. So 2 different senators talked to him yesterday during his testimony about that, and Powell was emphatic that state and local governments need that assistance. So I hope the Senate was paying attention. This is not a blue state, red state battle. It's an all-state battle right now. As I mentioned, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at Webull. You can go over there right now and get 2 free stocks just for signing up. So 2 free stocks if you go to morrisinvest.com/Webull. And when you do that, you'll also be entered into a chance to win that 3rd free premium stock. They're giving away Google stock right now, Apple and Walmart stock. And Google stock right now, it's at $1,700. So, it's free money, even if that first stock you get is $10. I know some people got their first stock was $30, then their second stock was $400. I mean, that's a rent payment for a lot of people just for opening the account for free. So check it out, morrisinvest.com/Webull is how you get those 2 free stocks, plus being entered into that chance to win that 3rd premium stock. So that's the very latest on the stimulus. Those are some of the big stories we're following today. And we should hear tomorrow from President Trump on this infrastructure plan. As early as Thursday, we're hearing from the White House. We could hear more details about that. And we hear that deep discussions are happening right now between the White House and the Senate Majority Leader and the leadership team in the Senate. So that's big news that while they're about to take their 2-week vacation, that they will have something in place by the August recess of a second round of stimulus. So we'll be following it for you when we have more details on that. Tomorrow, please make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow here on the show, we've got a big show. We've got our cryptocurrency show. This is going to be an education for me. It's going to be an education for you. We've got Anthony Pompliano on the show tomorrow, and we're going to be deep diving the world of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency in general, the people's currency. Look, I like to say there's 3 different types of currencies, right? There's government currency, which is fiat currency, that always has collapsed in world history. What do you think's happening right now to the US dollar? Then you have God's money, right? That's real estate, gold and silver. Stuff that you cannot remove from this earth. Land, gold, silver. And then the third thing is the people's currency, which emerged in 2009. And cryptocurrency, this, no state has control of it. The people have control of it. We know exactly how much is being created at any given time. And it's become one of the most powerful ways that we now have to invest. So we're going to deep dive cryptocurrency in an area that I'm becoming increasingly passionate about. So we'll have that here on the show tomorrow. So please make sure you subscribe to the channel and be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We will do our normal show and then open it up to Anthony, where we will deep dive questions about cryptocurrency. So my thanks to all of you. You guys are great. Thank you for all of your great feedback today on the show. Much love to all of you. We'll see you again tomorrow.